Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the City Council meeting for November 16th, 2009 to order. A couple of things, just some housekeeping items. If you happen to have a cell phone or a pager, we'd appreciate if you turn that to be silent or turn it off. We'd appreciate that. The other thing is if you do wish to speak to any item on the agenda, we do have speaker request forms. They look like this. They're to your left or right over on the media table. If you could fill those up with your name and also the number, that way, as we're making our way down the agenda, we'll make sure that we do not overlook you. As always, first thing on the agenda, we do need to have a roll call and determination of quorum. Amber, if you would, please.
Waugh? Here. Martinson? Here. Weicker? Costello?
Here.
LaCroix?
Here.
Chapman?
Here.
Olson? Here. Weifenbach? Here. Kroger? Hadcock? Here. We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. Next thing, as always, is the invocation. If everyone would please rise. Julie Norwood from Canyon Lake Church of God will be giving the invocation, and then if you would please remain standing, we'll go immediately to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you have given us, Lord. Our part is just to rejoice and be glad in it. And Lord, as the business of the city comes to convene tonight, I ask, oh God, that you would be here and that you would lead and guide, direct, manage, and administrate the affairs of our city. Lord, we take a moment just to give you thanks for living in a great city, Lord, and we ask that you would continue to watch over us, protect us, and guide us in all that we do, and those that are in leadership, Lord God. I ask that you would bless them, remind them that this is a service to the community and that they are appreciated. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Next thing is always on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. I do have a item 199 that needs to be added by our City Attorney Jason Green. Is that correct?
Yes, that item is to authorize the Mayor and Finance Officer to sign the letter of engagement with Nooney, Soleil, and Van Norman.
Okay, very good. Any additional? Please turn on your light. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add an item to the agenda under council items. It's a request for travel for one council member and one city staff to the National League of Cities Bank on Cities campaign.
Okay, we'll call that 147A. Any additional? Let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My request is not an addition, but a rearrangement regarding items 191 and 192, the Spring Creek Comprehensive Plan. This has been going on for quite some time, and it's traditionally they've sat around these people until the end of the meeting to listen to what we had to say. And I request that the council indulge me in asking that we move this forward.
Let's go ahead and get the other items be added to the agenda, and then we'll ask the council what their thoughts are.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just thank you to the volunteers and staff that help with Christmas lights this year.
Thanks. Any additional items to be added to the agenda tonight? Please turn on your light. Okay, if not, let's go ahead and take up the issue of whether or not the council would like to move items 191 and 192 up on the agenda. The best way to do that is, well, should we do that through motion, Jason, or just ask for concurrence? Let's ask for concurrence. Is it any discussion on that item? Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand what Alderman Costello is attempting to do, and I appreciate that, but I can remember a time where council members were moving items all over the agenda, and I won't be disappointed if it happens, but I won't vote in favor of it. And in full disclosure, I think that item might be continued tonight. So.
Both those items are, the recommendation is to continue both those items to February 16th, 2010. Okay, additional comments? Alderman Costello, did you want to add anything else? Go ahead, Aaron. You have the floor, sir.
I guess I can't understand where Alderman Chapman's coming from, but once again, this item's been on the docket for a long time, and that's a lot of waiting. So if there is any discussion to be on the matter, if it is a continuance, then I think we could dispose of it very quickly, and the folks who are most interested in it could go about their business this evening. I think that would give them peace of mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
I'm in concurrence with Alderman Chapman. We've done this in the past, and we always do a disservice to people who are actually here waiting to do something when we rearrange the calendar. And in some cases, it means that people who wish to speak don't get an opportunity to. So I just think I understand the complexity of this issue, and I do believe it is scheduled to be continued. But I will be voting no as well.
Okay. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in agreement with Ms. Olson and Mr. Chapman on this. I think we did this the last time it came up, and then we organized some site visits and so forth, and so I think we've done our fair share. And in light, it's going to be recommendations. It's continued. Tells me it's going to get some work done on it. So I'm not going to be in support of the motion. Thank you.
Very good. Well, let me tell you where we're at so far. Right now, we have to add to the items 147A, which is a travel request, item 147B, which is a thanks from Alderwoman Deb Hadcock, and item 199 from Jason Green, which is authorizing the mayor and the finance officer to sign, what was it, I'm sorry?
A letter of engagement.
Letter of engagement. Is there anything else? Okay. Letter of engagement, okay. Got it. Okay, if not, the chair would look for a motion to approve as amended. Okay, we have a motion and second. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you for indulging me. So just so I'm clear, then, as it stands right now, 191 and 192 will remain where they are.
That is correct.
Okay.
Unless you want to.
I make a motion to move 191 and 192 to let's see, can move them to perhaps after. Well, since there are no public works, there's only one public works item. Would it work to move them up to the public works section, Mr. Mayor?
Do you have a number? Where are you looking at?
I'm looking for it. What was that? It's so short in here. That'll be 137. That'd be after 137.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take this up real quick. There's a motion. Is there a second on the floor? There's a motion and a second on the floor to move items 191 and 192 to immediately follow item number 137. Any discussion on that motion? Just all we're doing is voting on the motion to move this item. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. So let's do a roll call real quick, and we'll move on.
Olson? No. Reifenbach? Hadcock? Wah?
No.
Martinson?
Aye.
Boyker?
Aye.
Costello?
Aye.
LaCroix?
No.
Chapman?
No.
5-4.
Motion passes 5-4. Okay. Now, what we'll look for is a motion to approve the agenda as advertised with the addition of items 147A, 147B, item 99, and moving, excuse me, 191 and 192 to immediately follow item 137. Everyone clear on that motion? And if so, I'd look for someone to make that motion, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. Next thing on the agenda, as always, is the approval of the minutes. Chair will look for a motion to approve the minutes from the November 2nd, 2009 City Council meeting. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. That does take us to awards and recognitions. And Christopher, I'll ask you to come up and join me. Once again, it's always a pleasure to recognize one of our veterans who has served our country so well and made sure that we enjoy the freedom in this country that we do. So let me read this. In partnership with the Veterans Coordination Commission, we're pleased to present the November 2009 Veteran of the Month recognition to Christopher R. Brockle. Christopher Brockle joined the United States Air Force in 1990 and was first assigned as a loadmaster and later reassigned to vehicle operations, where he remained until he was medically retired in 2008. Christopher was assigned to various bases in the United States as well as overseas, including Germany and Korea. Chris completed Airman Leadership School in the NCO Academy. Some of Tech Sergeant Brockle's awards and decorations include the Air Force Commendation Medal, the Air Force Achievement Medal, the Air Force Outstanding Unit Award with 5 Oak Clusters, the Air Force Good Conduct Medal, and be honest with you, that continues on and on. Let's see, one of Chris's greatest accomplishments and contributions happened in 1994 when he delivered a water recycling bladder to provide safe drinking water to hundreds of thousands of Rwanda inhabitants. Chris is a member of the Retired Enlistment Association, the American Legion, the Veteran of Foreign Wars, and is vice chairman of the Veterans Council in Rapid City. Chris served a distinguished and rewarding career in the United States Air Force that was cut short for medical reasons. Now he has capitalized on that experience to better himself by working at the new Air Force Financial Center at Ellsworth Air Force Base since his retirement. Chris and his wife Jennifer have one daughter, Dakota. Boy, you're cute. Chris is truly dedicated to the ideals of the military retiree and is willing to donate his time whenever needed within the TRIA organization. He is most proud of his military service and record and service to his country, state, city, and his family. Chris, on behalf of a grateful community, state, and nation, thank you for your service. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, just one thing that wasn't added on there. I'm also a member of DAV, which is the Disabled American Veterans. So I appreciate you guys coming out and supporting me, and also my brothers in TRIA. Thanks for coming out and supporting me. And I'd like to thank the community, because it's been a wonderful community, and that's why we chose to be here. So thank you.
Why don't you come over here? Jason, you want to come up? Where's Amy? There she is. One of the other honors that we have every month is to recognize long-standing employees that have been with us for a number of years, and I can't believe Amy's actually been here for 20 years. With that, I'm going to allow Jason Green, to our city attorney, to actually tell us a little bit about Amy's career at the city.
Thank you, Mayor. Amy has worked in the city attorney's office for 5 years. She's spent time working in parking enforcement and the city finance office as well, so she's well-rounded in her experience with the city. One of the things that I really wanted to mention is that Amy probably has one of the most trying jobs in the city, and it's not necessarily because she works for 4 attorneys. Amy answers the phone that's printed on the back of parking tickets. So when people are upset about a $5 parking ticket, Amy gets to deal with those folks. She handles those calls with patience and professionalism, and oftentimes makes people as happy as you can make someone who's just received a parking ticket. Beyond that, she's an integral part of our office in keeping the attorneys on schedule, making sure we have the information we need to do our jobs, and we certainly hope that she'll be around for another 20 years. Thank you, Amy.
Say a few words. Why don't you come over here and let's get a picture.
Come over here with you.
Yep. Come on. You know, Amy did want me to tell everybody she did start the city when she was 9. Makes her 29 now, right? Okay. Where's Jerry? Come on up, Jerry. Jerry's going to actually present some awards and talk about some folks that have been very dedicated to the parks in Rapid City, and they were recently recognized. And so with that, I'm going to let Jerry introduce them and tell us a few words about not only the folks, but also the awards that they received.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, citizens. I'd like to start off saying that this has been an excellent year for Parks and Recreation. We actually have received an award from the Midwest Association for the dirt jump that we built last year. We found out that we were selected as the best special event from the member organization through National Parks and Recreation Association, but the 3 best awards that we have this year are with 3 individuals. The first was presented to Christy Lentz for this year's Young Professional Honoree in Parks and Recreation. Christy is a special event specialist for the department and oversees such events as the NAIA Women's Golf Tournament, the Black Hills Fat Tire Festival, and others that we're associated with. The second award was presented to Wes Storm for the 2009 Individual Citation Award for Parks and Recreation. Wes has been a member of the Golf Committee on Parks and Recreation and the Parks and Recreation Board since its inception in 2004. The final award was the induction into the State of South Dakota Parks and Recreation Hall of Fame. This is the highest honor that an individual can receive through Parks and Recreation. This award was given to a person we all know and respect, Van Lindquist, chairman of the Parks and Recreation Board. Over the past 38 years have been working for the ideals to make city better through Parks and Recreation. We would like to congratulate all these individuals, and if they would come forward, for keeping Rapid City a great place to work, live, and play. Thank you.
Get here and let's get a picture. Sherry, why don't you stand on one side? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We're now on to the general public comment period. This is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at tonight's meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by the unanimous vote of the council members present. I do not have any speaker request forms for the general public comment period. This is for an item that's not on the agenda. Does anyone wish to have any issue taken up tonight on any issue not on the agenda? If not, we will move on. Chair would look for a motion to open the non-public hearing items 3 through 148 inclusive, please.
So move.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Just need to verify one thing here. Okay, just for clarification, we will take up, since we did move item 191 and item 192 up on the agenda, this would be the appropriate time if you wish to speak to those items also. So we'll call you up as we go. We do have a speaker request form on item number 89, Jack White. Mr. White, you there again, just identify yourself for the record, and we do allow 3 minutes, and so if you just watch the lights, Jack, I think you know the routine.
Yes. Good evening. My name's Jack White, and I'm from, I live out in the valley. And on item number 89, on the drainage ditches out in Homestead subdivision area, we've got a kind of a problem out there because almost 50 acres of this land now drains into these 2 ponds that they created out there. And the city didn't know about the drainage problems that was changed by the Corps of Engineers. And finally, we just had a meeting on October 22nd of this year with the Corps, and they told us why they moved the outlet of this drainage ditch. And our biggest problem out there between myself and the neighbors is the standing water that's in that lower ditch. It's over 1.5 feet deep. It does not drain to the outlet because the drainage ditch is graded wrong. And I know there's a few items that still have to be completed, and it was, Public Works gave a date till 1 April to be done, but my neighbors and I would like to know what the items are. And the other request is on the curb and gutter on Zebach Street, which is the street that I'm in the county. The developer that put this curb and gutter in, it's too high. The water doesn't drain into the curb and gutter. The curb and gutter is higher than the street. And at the present time, there's a new developer out there trying to build a house in this area. And he has to build a sidewalk up quite a bit in order to match the curb and gutter. And he feels it's wrong. But when we were talking to the city engineers from Growth Management, they said that's a county problem. Well, in this subdivision, the county doesn't handle us at all. We're in no man's land out there, just like Big Sky. So we'd like to make sure that this is on the scrub list to get fixed out there before this thing is completed. And I know I was talking to the developers that are building that home. He wants to put in new sidewalks and everything else by the end of November. And the April 1st date of next year is not very good because he needs to know what you're going to do ahead of time. And the other question I have big to all you folks up here is, and I know I was talking to Sam earlier, the Big Sky subdivision, all their roads, you've got against the developer that come in and fix the roads. Well, Valley Ridge subdivision that I live in was put in by the same developer, and our roads are falling apart too, and we'd like to be getting added to that complaint on the roads out of Big Sky. So that's about where we're at, and I'd like to find out what the items are that they're going to repair by April 1st.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Let's see, Jason Green did inform me that since items number 191 and 192 are actually public hearing items, we do need to have a special period where we actually take public comment. So we'll do that immediately before we take those up, right after item 137. Okay, Jack, at this point, we typically, this is for public hearing. We don't have back and forth exchanges. Someone is welcome to actually pull it from the agenda if one of the council members wishes to do that, and then we can have that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, at this point, Chair will look for, I have no further speaker request forms on any items 3 through 148 inclusive. The chair would look, 3 through 131 inclusive. Chair would look for a motion to close the public comment period. Items 3 through 131 inclusive, please.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Chair will look for any items to be pulled from the consent calendar. There again, the consent calendar is items 3 through 123 inclusive. any of those items be pulled? Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Number 89.
Number 89, very good, thank you. Additional items to be pulled from the consent calendar, item 3 through 123 inclusive. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker. 106. Thank you. Any additional items to be pulled from the consent calendar? Please turn on your light. If not, the chair will look for a motion to approve the consent calendar, item 3 through 123 inclusive, with the exception of item number 89 and 106, please.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are on to item number 89, which is a public works item. Alderman Costello, if you could please read that in.
Certainly. Item number 89 is to set April 1st, 2010 as the deadline for the improvements to be completed on the Homestead subdivision drainage, and I move for approval.
We have a motion and a second for approval to set April 1st, 2010 as the deadline for the improvements to be completed, the Homestead subdivision drainage. We're going to give a little bit of latitude here because I know that there's probably some questions out there, but let's try and keep it fairly close to the topic. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. I know the staff recommendation or the recommendation that came from Public Works was to continue the item until the April 19th, 2010 meeting. So if someone could explain how we're going to continue the item past the date that we're asking that the improvements be done.
Marcia?
Thank you. If you'll notice in your packet, there's a correction to item 89, and that is to accurately reflect the action of the Public Works Committee, which was to set the deadline for April 1st for the improvements to be completed.
Anything else? Very good. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Marcia, do we have the punch list available that can be read into the record as to what needs to be done?
Marcia?
If you'll review the memo that was directed to the Public Works Committee, it indicates that Mr. McNoby has to redesign the facility, and he's looking at some alternatives, and that's all stated in that memorandum. So the reason to continue this to April 1st was to allow him to do that redesign, submit it for review, go through the appropriate review period, also allow the construction to occur this winter when it hopefully will be frozen enough that they can get into that wet area to deal with that. So at this point in time, we don't have a final set of approved plans to address those issues.
Okay, go ahead, Sam. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So the effect of this motion, Marcia, if it passes to set April 1 as the deadline for the improvements to be completed, among those improvements means that the drainage issues would be fixed.
Correct. That's my understanding of the motion and the direction to the developer.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Additional questions? Additional discussion. Motion on the floor is for approval. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
So can I ask Marcia a question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Marcia, so at this point, have we had a neighborhood meeting maybe and talked to some of the people? Because I know this has been on Jack and other people's list out there for a while to kind of know what's going on. Have we kept them up to date on what's happening with what's going on in that area?
Marcia?
My understanding is that a number of the interested parties, including Mr. White, have attended some of the inspections and actually been on the site with the staff and with the other representatives from the other agencies that are impacted, as Mr. White indicated.
Okay. Can I ask Jack a question?
Sure. Go ahead. State your question, please.
Jack, at this point, are you understanding what they're saying with the punch list and April 1st and the deadlines and different things? You did ask us about the 2 ponds charged by the Corps of Engineers, the Big Sky complaints, and some other things. Did we meet your concerns, or is there something else that we need to add to this?
Well, our biggest concern between my neighbor and I, because we live on Ziebach, is all the standing water just standing in the street. I do have a picture of it, and I think the picture was given to some of the council people, that when they put this curb and gutter in, and then when they and they came back and put some asphalt, so it goes up like this, and there was no water will ever get into that curb and gutter area, the drain. And right now, there's a standing puddle out there, and if it freezes, and this is now open to the public, this road comes from the county into the city or vice versa, and we could have an accident there. And plus, the individuals trying to build a home there is wondering, is this curb and gutter in the right place?
Okay.
Let me ask the
Because of the
obvious
level of the
question
road.
here. We're getting a little bit off topic here because the item on the agenda is dealing strictly with drainage.
Yes.
Is this road within the corporate limits or outside the corporate limits? Marcia?
I believe the portion that Mr. White's referring to is outside the corporate limits of the city of Rapid City.
Okay.
Does
And
it
Deb,
have-
my
Go
apologies for, I think we need to try and keep this to the motion on the floor, and that is dealing with the drainage, and if there's additional concern with roads, I think we'll need to take that up separately.
So does this by chance, either Robert or Marcia, does this affect the drainage that it's going into by this curb that's going into the city drainage area? And
Marcia?
My understanding is it does not. It's another issue. They're not directly tied together.
So if we needed to help Mr. White, what would your be recommendation on this curb in order to get this suffice so we can actually make a difference? Because if it's, we have the same thing with Big Sky where we're in between and we're trying to help people, and I'd like to know possibly what we can do to help people in these areas, why these concerns are trying to be
Okay.
met.
We'll let you answer, but there again, please keep in mind, I want to give a little bit of latitude, but
Okay.
that is not the actual issue that we're discussing here.
I apologize,
That's all
Mayor.
right. Marcia, go ahead.
Again, I'd be glad to meet with Mr. White regarding the curb issue, which I believe is a slightly different issue than the one that's been under consideration, which is the drainage, to see what the issues are and see what we can come up with.
And if we could, one more question.
Mhm.
Marcia, if we could set up a meeting, I'd like to be at that meeting, and maybe other council members with Mr. White, and see if we can actually all get together and see what's going on out there, and you can explain it to us just a little bit better. And I apologize, I probably should have emailed and set that up earlier, Miss Marcia, so if we could, that's not to put on the agenda, but just something if,
Yep.
request if we could
Okay, thank you.
have some help from Mr. White.
Okay, let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Marcia.
Go ahead,
I'll state
please.
my question. The drainage issue, is that in the corporate limits or outside the corporate limits?
Marcia?
Bob's told me that that portion is inside the corporate limits.
If it was outside the corporate limits, who controls either or out there? Is
Marcia?
that the city or the county?
Typically, that would be the county, depending on where it falls in terms of development activity.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion on the floor is to set April 1st, 2010 as the deadline for the improvements to be completed in the Homestead subdivision drainage. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Amber, did I say 2004 or 2010? The intent is 2010. That is the published vote. I think these guys have hard hearing over here. Pretty sure I said 10. What? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Item 106, please. That falls under legal and finance. That would be Alderwoman Karen Gunderson Olson.
Item number 106 is acknowledge the receipt of a petition to create a downtown business improvement district. And my motion would be to acknowledge the receipt of the petitions.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to acknowledge the receipt of the petitions. Discussion on the motion. There again, keep in mind, the action tonight is to acknowledge the petitions. So there again, if we could try and limit the discussion as far as whether or not it's appropriate to accept those petitions. Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quicker. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is if we could just have a brief explanation on how this works. Are these informal petitions or formal petitions? And if they're formal petitions, what percentage of the property owners need to sign it? How many did sign it? And how does that work? Could help me out.
Okay, let's go to Jason Green, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. These are not formal petitions that you would normally see for nominations or to refer a matter or to initiate a matter. So they don't have that same rigid set of requirements for form and notarization and those kinds of things. It appears from the face of the petitions and based on the representations of the petitioners that they have a sufficient number of signatures on the petition to require the public hearing. Now, it's not just a straight number of property owners. It's based on the linear front feet that can be assessed. So if a person owns multiple properties with different sizes, their signatures, obviously count for different amounts based on the property they own. At the public hearing that has been set by action on an item that was on the consent calendar, anyone who objects will have the opportunity to bring that forward. And if a majority of the owners of the linear front feet in the proposed bid object, then at that point, the bid cannot proceed by statute. So tonight's action really is a formality. You've acknowledged the petition, or you will acknowledge the petition with this item. The other item has set the public hearing for January 11th at 7 p.m. That's the time for ruling and considering any objections to the petitions.
Okay. Alderman Quake, you still have the floor, sir.
So the petitions then are available and open to public inspection for anybody who would like to see them. And the way this works is when this comes to the council, there has to be a certain percentage of linear, or a certain percentage of the businesses that want this, otherwise it will not proceed.
So Jason,
regardless of the council's decision.
Yes, regardless of the council's decision, if the majority of the owners of front feet within the business improvement district object, at that point the council does not have the authority to proceed. If there is a majority of the owners of the front feet that want the council to proceed, that will be up to the discretion of the council at that time as to whether or not you do in fact proceed. One other thing that I should mention is, as a part of setting that public hearing, the city staff will be required to send out notification to all of the property owners within the business improvement district of that hearing. So everyone who owns property will get a letter from the city identifying the time and place of the hearing.
Okay.
One more question, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Jason, how is the majority determined? Is it a ballot? Is it letters? Is it whoever responds? Is it whoever speaks? How does that work?
Jason?
Well, the only majority that you really look for is to see if you have a majority objecting to the creation of the district. If there is not a majority objecting to the creation of the district, the city council would have the legal authority to create the district. But again, that doesn't happen until the public hearing, which is January 11th.
So we'll have a list available of all of the owners, so that then that way we'll know what the percentage is of people that object and how that factors out in terms of linear feet.
Jason?
Yes, in terms of linear feet, we'll try and have a very, very detailed schematic available so we know exactly how much each owner has as far as a percentage of the total that's available in the district, so the council can make that determination.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson. There again, the motion on the floor is to acknowledge the petitions.
I think it's important to, I speak in support of the petition brought forward. I think it's an important thing for our community and will be the long-term benefits I see as being very positive, and this is a first step in that process.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I too think this is a positive step forward. And I think Sam's question answered mine is, when we talk about the objection, my curiosity was how do we determine the majority? Is it just by them standing up or signing a letter, taking testimony? We voted out. That was my question, but I think I pretty much got it squared
Let's
out.
go to Jason Green for clarification. My understanding is based upon the signatures on the petition in the amount of linear feet that they represent.
And actually at the hearing, it would have to be by written objection of those opposed to it.
That was my question. So they'd have it written and then we could compare it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Motion on the floor is to acknowledge. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. That does take us to the end of the consent calendar. We are on to the continued consent items. This is item 124 through 131 inclusive. Marcia, do we expect any of those to be pulled? 125. How about from the council? Any items 124 through 131 inclusive need to be pulled from the continued consent calendar? If so, please turn on your light. Seeing none, the chair look for motion to approve the continued consent items 124 through 131 inclusive, with the exception of item 125. Do we have a motion and second? Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 125, please. Let's see. Growth Management. Karen, can you read item 125 in, please?
It's a request by Forefront Design Incorporated for Rapid City Economic Development Foundation for a preliminary plat on Lot 1R and Lot 2 of Block 3 of Rushmore Business Park. The general description locates this at 333 Concourse Drive. And my motion would be
To approve with revised steps.
to approve with revised stipulations.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Just for clarification, the council members should have the revised stipulations within their packets for item 125. Is that correct, Marcia? Okay. Motion is for approval with the revised stipulations, item 125, which is a preliminary plat. Any further discussion on that motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. That does take us to the end of the continued consent items. We're on to the non-consent items. This is items 132 through 148. 132 through 148 inclusive. Chair looking for a motion to open the public comment period on items 132 through 148 inclusive, please.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Let's go to Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that we moved 191 and 192. Are we including them in
No.
this public comment? We're not.
Nope, we need to actually have a separate motion to open the public comment on both items 191 and 192 separately. Is that correct, Jason? Okay, so we will not be taking up the public comment, even though they are included within that range. Okay, I have no speaker request forms. I see no lights. Chair will look for a motion to close the public comment period on item 132 through 148 inclusive. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 132, please.
First reading of ordinance number 5558, an ordinance adding conditional uses in the Business Park zoning district by amending section 17.56.030 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. My motion is for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of first reading of ordinance 5558. Any discussion on that motion? Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had some questions on this, and I think this is a good motion to start to do some of these things to allow a little more leniency and bring ourselves into the year 2010. One of the questions I have on this is I didn't see the manufacturing of solid-state electronics, such as computers or computer boards or switches and those types of items, and I was hoping that if it's not included in there, if we can make an amendment to include that in there, or maybe Marcia could explain.
Marcia?
If you look at the list of items that are identified, who's the manufacturer, compounding, assembling, or treatment of articles of merchandise from the following previously prepared materials: be aluminum, bone, cellophane, canvas, cloth, cork, feathers, felt, fiber, fur, glass, hair, horn, leather, paper, plastics, precious or semi-precious metals or stones, shell, rubber, textiles, on and on. I believe it would fall under those kinds of descriptions. To do the kind of manufacturing you're talking about, electronic materials, made out of metals, semi-precious stones, silicone, chips, the like.
Mr. Mayor, I was hoping that we could just in case for some reason I'm not here, if anybody ever wants to put a computer manufacturing place in there, if we could, or maybe get a ruling from our city attorney or somebody that would cover, like, and maybe I'll yield to some of my colleagues, like silicone type, valley type items, technological items, specifically electronics. I don't know if that would be too much to ask to change that, or
Now, what we can do, Alderman Weifenbach, if you'd like, we can actually have the staff come back with a recommendation. This is first reading, and they can actually come back with a recommendation on second reading as it makes its way back through the legal and finance.
Would we have to vote on that, Mr. Mayor?
We can just vote on it today, and then what they'll do is they'll actually bring back a clarification through second reading.
Would we have to direct the staff to do that then, or what would we have to do?
No,
Nothing? You can just do that?
Yep, we'll do that.
Well, thank you. If you don't mind, if Marcia doesn't mind.
Marcia's writing it down, so.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is for approval of first reading of ordinance 5558. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item 133, please.
First reading of ordinance number 5561, an ordinance to change the due date of occupancy tax remittances for State Business Improvement District Number 1 by amending section 3.24.080 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. My motion is for approval.
Second.
We have a motion second for approval of ordinance number 5561. Any discussion on the motion? I'm going to go to Jason Green. We're good to go on that number? Okay, very good. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item 134, please.
First reading of ordinance number 5559, an ordinance to transfer the Energy Plant Division from the Department of Public Works to the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center Board by amending and transferring section 2.44.060 of the Rapid City Municipal Code to section 2.76.160 of the code. My motion is for approval.
Second.
We have a motion second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had some discussions on this item, and I still have a slight concern that there's some items that are, we're basically turning over the control of this to the Civic Center Board, which is a board that's not specifically directed by the city staff. I was hoping that maybe we could look at an alternative that maybe would allow the Civic Center to control that part of the energy plan, but if it's more of an administration thing. I guess if the mayor's comfortable with it, I could probably be comfortable with it, but I just had some concern at the fact that some of the control would leave the Public Works Department, and some of the buildings are city buildings. Most of them looks like are, there is some monitoring on a lot of the city buildings, but there's also some controls on some of the city buildings, mostly the school buildings. So that would be my concern, and if maybe you could clarify it, and thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
At the Legal and Finance Committee meeting, I too had some questions about this, but I've been assured that the essential duties of the energy plant really are more computer monitoring rather than dispensing or, I don't know what the word is for describing sending energy to the plant. And so when it became a monitoring situation and a computer activity, that made me a little. I understood better what was going on than at first. Initially, I thought perhaps an engineer needed to be a part of this, but I see that this is largely a computer monitoring situation. And in addition to that, it seemed to me very. I have a lot of confidence in the Public Works and Mr. Ellis's recommendation, and I've observed that. In my experience, engineers don't give away things that they think they really need to understand and be able to manage. So I have quite a lot of confidence in this decision now.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Engineer Aaron Costello.
Thank you, Alderman Olson, for that chuckle. I appreciate that. Alderman Weifenbach and Alderwoman Olson are correct in saying that mainly what this plan does is it really monitors. Through speaking with Robert and Brian, we learned that there is a bit of control, but mainly it's only an emergency side. And part of the misunderstanding comes from the fact that this place is called the energy plant because it's a misnomer. There's really no energy. There's no energy being made. There's no generators. All it's doing is sending hot air, hot water, cold water. And in Alderman Weifenbach and I sat with Brian and Robert, and they explained to us just what goes on there, and I'm comfortable as well in handing the controls over to the Civic Center Board, because really Gunnar, who runs the place or is in charge of the place, he works so closely with Brian that it's almost like adding another level of bureaucracy if he would have to go through Robert to make any decisions. So I think this is a good move for efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, the energy plant actually has a user board, which is made up of just a couple people. One is Robert Ellis, and the other one is Mike Kenton from the schools. So really, the oversight actually comes from that user board, not really the Civic Center board. The other thing to remind you is the fact that this facility is self-funding. In other words, all the money that they use to actually operate actually either comes from the school district or from the Civic Center. And my understanding was it was about 90%, 95% of all the work that they actually do out of this facility is either for the schools or for the Civic Center. So needless to say, I've been looking at it because Robert Ellis had to convince me also. So, very good. Thank you for that discussion. I'm going to go to Alderman Sam Quaker, who has not had the opportunity to speak yet.
Thank you, Mayor. How many employees work for the energy plant other than Gunnar?
Is it five? I was going to say 5. It's 6. That includes Gunnar.
So the union processes stay the same, the grievance processes stay the same.
Yes.
There's really that nothing changes in that sense.
Yep. Really about the only thing that changes is who Gunnar will actually present his budget to through the budgetary process. Instead of going through Robert, it'll actually go through the Civic Center. And realistically, that's about the extent of it, isn't it, Robert? Okay.
So if you don't mind my asking, Mayor, who pitched for the change? Was this something that Public Works pitched for?
Yeah, quite frankly, this is something that I've been looking at since the day I became Public Works Director. I just never really understood why this was a function of the Public Works Department.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to, let's see, I'm going to go to Alderwoman Karen Olson, and that'll be followed by Alderman Ron Weifenbach. So let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
I'm sorry. I was just going to reiterate what you said about the 3-member committee that were.
Yep, very good. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question's for Jason Green. And the question I have would be, does this alter the user board, or does the user, I mean, there's a contract that's in place, but this says, I mean, it's kind of vague. It says transfer the energy plant division from the Department of Public Works to the Rushmore. Does that change any of the contract, the user board, or any of that stuff?
Let's go to Jason Green, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. No, it doesn't change any of that. The user board will remain in place. Really, what transferring that division under the Civic Center does is it changes the supervisor. That's really what you're doing with this ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion on the floor is for approval of first reading of ordinance number 5559. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. Item 135, please.
First reading ordinance number 5560, an ordinance to update the list of unlawful acts of discrimination by amending section 2.64.030 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. My motion is for approval.
Second. Have a motion, second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Item 136, please.
First reading ordinance number 5562, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by the City of Rapid City for a rezoning from no use district to medium density residential on property located at 2828 Orchard Lane. My motion is for approval.
We have a motion, second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Let's go to Alderwoman Patty Martinson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a question to Marcia. It seemed to me that this driveway, that is the third driveway, seems to be almost a loading dock of some sort. Functions as a loading dock. Is there any kind of?
Yep, we're actually on item 136, Patty.
Yeah, I thought so.
I think you're referring to item 137.
Oh, I meant to have the one. Oh, that's 137. My apologies
Okay,
then.
that's right.
I withdraw the question.
Yep, we'll be back to you the next question. Okay, any further discussion? The motion on the floor is for approval of first reading of ordinance number 5562, which is item 136 on the agenda. Any additional discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 137, Public Works item. Alderman Costello.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Mayor. Item number 137 is deny a request for exception to section 8.2.1H of the general requirements for driveways from the City of Rapid City Street Design Criteria Manual to allow 3 driveways to a business establishment for Steel Plaza, generally known, located at 3618 Canyon Lake Drive. And I move to uphold the denial.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, second for denial. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderwoman Patty Martinson.
I think I got the right one. Did you understand my question, Marcia?
Plan, but probably better is this drawing. You can see this is the curb cut that needs to be cut, or it needs to be eliminated, and it really is providing access to this area of the site. There are some parking spaces that have been located behind here. You can see how it's impacting the new patio area that's proposed. This item comes forward because of the request for the patio area that's been operating without having the proper approvals. So again, it's to close that third approach. So I don't believe it is operating as a loading or unloading area. Again, this is the first approach, second approach, and then you saw the third approach.
Okay. Patty, you still have the floor, ma'am.
Yeah, no more
Anything else?
questions.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a plaza that I'm in fairly often. There's several businesses to which I use, and it makes total sense to me to eliminate the third access point. There is danger because there's two that are not very far apart, and when you pull out, you have to look both ways several times because cars come in and out both entrances, and I think this will make this business site safer. And because I certainly know in my driving habits, it would make it definitely much safer. So I'm in support of upholding the denial.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I too agree with the denial of this. I do commend that you put up some poles in case some vehicles try to go through that area there, but it just doesn't make sense to have that driveway pulling in when you have people outside in that area, especially when we've had accidents downtown where they've come across the curb and into pedestrians. So I'll be supporting the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What makes me comfortable with the motion on the floor is when Mr. Steele came to tell us about why he needed this driveway, he said it's for loading purposes only. I have about 3 years of truck unloading experience through my volunteer shift at the Red Root Co-op. And when I've looked at this property, knowing how skilled delivery drivers are, I think it will not impact their ability to deliver goods whatsoever. So that's why I'm in support of the motion.
Okay. Thank you. Motion on the floor is for denial. Any further discussion on that motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Let's take a roll call if we would, please. Wasn't sure there's one or
Weifenbach? Adcock? Waugh?
Aye.
Martinson? Weicker? Costello?
Aye.
LaCroix?
Aye.
Chapman?
Aye.
Wilson? That is 8-1.
8-1?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 8-1, so the motion is for denial is upheld. Okay, at this point, the chair will look for a motion to open the public comment period on items 191 and 192, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. We are in the public comment period for items number 191 and 192. I do have a speaker request form from Brian Finsky, item 192. There again, Brian, if you come up and identify yourself, I happen to know who you are, but you'd identify yourself, and as the lights turn yellow, if you just wrap up your comments. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and thank you very much for the 7 council members that were able to come out and look at our situation going on out in Neck Yoke Road area. Neck Yoke Road's very busy, not particularly this time of year, but in the summertime. We get a lot of bicyclers, and we get a lot of motorcycles, and just cars driving up. There's quite a scenic byway up into the hills, you know, through Rockerville and Old Keystone. That's the main concern, I guess, is we've got a lot of traffic of people sightseeing. And as you go from Rapid City out Neck Yoke, and you turn left on Murray Lane, which is the proposed connector feeder, that doesn't seem so bad, but our problem is with traffic coming downhill off of the top of Neck Yoke, and they could be approaching speeds of 55 to 60 miles an hour, and they try to make that sharp right turn onto Murray Lane. It's pretty tricky. Coming into work every morning, we hit the stop sign right at Murray Lane and Neck Yoke and turn right, and you have to really put it into gear, otherwise someone will be right in your tailpipe pretty much immediately. A lot of kids going to school, parents going to work, traffic just coming into town. So it's kind of a concern for the neighborhood. That's our reason for being here and being persistent in this issue, is just we are concerned that the neighborhood is going to change if that becomes a major collector, I guess bringing traffic from Spring Creek Road up over the mountain and be coming over to Neck Yoke that direction. So we're trying to keep that traffic a little bit lower and safer if possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We also have a speaker request form from Julie Mueller, item 192. There again, Julie, if you'd just please identify yourself for the record.
I'm Julie Mueller, and I too would like to thank those of you who made it out and met with some of us landowners out there. I would also like to thank you for moving us up a little bit on the agenda. I did call the mayor's office on November 5th to find out how to be placed on an agenda or on the schedule, and talked to a very nice gal I got transferred to, and she said she wouldn't be setting the agenda till the 12th. So she would go ahead and ask her supervisor if it would be okay to move us up. So we did try, and the reason I'd ask that is because we have sat here, you know, I think we're going on 7 months, and we've sat here for quite a few hours for a 5-minute, you know, and our item takes 5 minutes. So we weren't trying to be pushy. We were just trying to be, you know, respectful of our time as well as yours, because, so I did try to go through channels to get us put on the agenda sooner. We've been on items, you know, like 75, 76 before, so we weren't quite sure why we got pushed to 191 and 192. But I just wanted to thank you for hearing us a little sooner. Again, as Brian said, we did take some of you up the hill. It's about, I believe, a mile up a windy hill with trees on each side that perhaps 6 months of the year won't see much for sun. I do believe we had an accident there on November 11th, on the night of Veterans Day, and I did try to find out, call the Sheriff's Department and find out some, you know, statistics for you guys to see what had happened, and it wasn't even icy. There's been no ice on the road. So, and if I'm not mistaken, there was I tried to call Rockerville Fire Department to find out what had happened. I think they from what I'd heard from my sister who had called, who was leaving our house, said that there were emergency vehicles there and a vehicle was turned over. So the next thing is, thank you for coming to look at the ravine where the road is planned. I don't know how there could be a road there. If you could, you know, I don't know if you're going to vote on it tonight to do away with the plan because of the intersection and because of the road going off of Wallace up and over the hill, that I don't know that you could put a road there, and I think some of you saw that. And I'm so thankful that you could come out and visually see it, because going out there made a huge difference for us. And any of you, if you choose to continue this again, if there's any way that, you know, there's something we could do to go sooner in the agenda, if there's something we need to do so that we don't have to sit, you know, a couple hours, that would be great, being it's been going on for a while. And if there's any of you, if you do choose to continue this, if there's any of you who would still like to come out and look at the areas, we are still more than willing to show you. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We also have a speaker request form from Mike Mueller, item 192.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, and thank you, Mr. Costello, for advancing this in the agenda. On June 1st, it was item 76 under Public Works. Could be Growth Management. I guess I don't know how that's assembled and how that's identified, but we appreciate the acceleration of this item. We have had 7 members. Ms. Olson, as the member of the Future Land Use Committee, came out on a snowy morning on the 29th of October, which was kind of a tough morning, but they still struggled out and got there. They didn't dare take the road that we were talking of just for the sake of the condition of that road. I invited them to come another day. Mr. Copel is here and has invited us to go through that gate anytime we want to see any of the properties associated with the ravine, et cetera, as many of you have already seen individually. But I would respectfully ask Mr. LaCroix's suggestion to me with the Future Land Use Committee was a very good idea. However, we were short-circuited with the weather. So if this would be continued and we would have opportunity to discuss other options again with that committee, if they meet on Thursday mornings every other week or wherever that may be, and if we could be invited as a neighborhood, I'm sure we'd get some takers to do that and maybe come up with some other solutions. As we have obvious problems with this, as has been stated by many of our neighbors and many objections, the terrain out there does not lend itself to become the standard spacing for arterials and collectors. The city may be growing, I'm not sure at what rate. If this is something that has prudence for development, if there's something pushing the item, I think then the developer needs to take some responsibility and maybe offer up some property. As you look at the zoning, rural reserve and 10 acres per lot per home is predominantly what we have outside the PUD that is now in front of the Hart Ranch on the future land use plan. So if it's future land use with a PUD that could become densely populated, then I think it's a Hart Ranch issue. They connect Arena Drive. I realize you need 2 outlets when you get to a certain population, and that may require Arena Drive on over to somewhere else. So as you consider this as a continuance, we appreciate your indulgence and letting us go on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so everyone knows, the reason you went from about an item number 80 to 191 is we had about 120 liquor licenses that we take up once a year, and they happen to be on our agenda. And they were actually dealt with through the consent calendar, so that's the reason. Let's see, I also have a speaker request form from John Ziegler, 192. There again, John, if you could identify yourself for the record.
You bet, Mayor. My name's John Ziegler. Thanks for having us down here tonight and advancing this on the agenda. I guess I'm just the guy to kind of solidify the fact that having a major intersection at Marie and Neck Yoke Road is not a good place. My land lays right there. In fact, my driveway lays right there. And I've been out there for 22 years, and I've seen quite a few accidents right there in that corner. And I'm not an engineer or anything, but common sense tells me that having an intersection right there, especially one that would ever have a light or anything, just is not going to be a good deal. I can't see how you could ever, if you change the grade of the road or whatever, as long as you have an S-curve in that thing, I don't know how you come out on a curve and have a light right there on it. So, I mean, I've had rigs flipped upside down. I've had them plow completely across my driveway into my fence over the years. And I mean, I'm right there on that intersection. I mean, I'm not laying up that road no 300 feet or anything. My driveway lays right at Marine Lane and Neck Yoke Road. And they're right. I mean, my mailbox lays right there. When I go to get my mail, I have one eye in that mailbox and the other eye's on that road coming off that hill. Because I'll tell you what, a lot of people have run off that road. And a lot of them, well, like last Wednesday night, that accident last Wednesday night, that road was plumb dry. And evidently somebody come around that corner and couldn't quite hold it on that corner. So that's a real dangerous corner right there, and I guess that's my 2 bits worth, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. That is all the speaker request forms I have on items 191 and 192. Chair will look for a motion to close the public comment period on items 191 and 192.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion on that motion. Ron, I assume you don't want to talk about the motion to close, do you? Okay. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. So we are on to item number 191. And let's see, Karen, can you go ahead and read that in, please? Item 191, please.
A request by the City of Rapid City to consider an application for an amendment to the comprehensive plan adopting the Spring Creek Neighborhood Area Future Land Use Plan on property located south of Spring Creek, east of Boulder Hill Road, north of Knotty Pine Road, and west of South Dakota Highway 79. And my motion is, I guess I have to ask Marcia because there's been some discussion about
Marcia, what's the recommendation?
The Future Land Use Committee has recommended this be continued to your February 16th, 2010 meeting. And the reason for that was so that the Future Land Use Committee could have another neighborhood meeting, including these neighbors and the folks in the area where there's been proposed that the road be moved to. That would be another neighborhood meeting like we've had in the past. And so they thought that would be best to do that after the first of the year. That's the reason for the February 16th recommendation.
Thank you, Marcia. And that would be my motion to continue it to the February 16th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue this item to the February 16, 2010 meeting. Discussion on that motion. Just a reminder, the motion is for continuation, so let's try and hold it as close to that motion as we can. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess that answers a lot of my question. I was ready to see if we could just distinguish this item and just eliminate that road. But if there needs to be discussion about moving the road or whatever, if that's an important part of this, the remainder of this neighborhood area future land use plan, then I guess I could probably live with that, but understanding that this has been going on for quite some time and adding another meeting. I guess one question, Mayor, I would have would be is, are we holding up the entire plan over one road?
Let's go to Marcia Elkins.
I mean, would there be a reason we just couldn't eliminate this road?
Marcia?
That was an issue that was discussed by the Future Land Use Committee. Actually, it's been discussed several times. They felt it was very important that we preserve these corridors for future roadways, even though they're a significant period of time down the road before they would be constructed. But preservation of roadway corridors was an item that was specifically identified. So, yes, it is the only item that's been holding this up for some 7 months.
Okay. Is there a possibility we could just eliminate this specific road? And I mean, they could move forward with their plan, and if they want to put in another road, they can have those conversations. I'd just like these people to move on with their lives. I spent some time up there, and there is some major concern. If you drive there and you try to turn, I mean, when I went there, the roads were completely dry. It's the bottom of a hill where they want to put the turn. If you drive up the gravel road, the county section line, and you head, I believe, to the east and back to the north, there's a ravine there that's close to unsurmountable in my mind. But
the way, Ron, the way you would do that, if you wish to offer a substitute motion to, I'm trying to think, I'm going to look to Marcia. I don't know if was this advertised for tonight, or can we actually act upon it or not?
Yes, it's been advertised and
Okay.
continued numerous times.
So, you're okay, if you wish to offer a substitute motion to approve, and I understand what your intent would be to remove this road, you can offer that in the form of a substitute motion. I'm looking to Jason Green to make sure that I'm proceeding correctly, correct? Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve and remove this road off this Springbrook neighborhood area future land use plan.
Okay, do we have a second? I'll second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now, there again, Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it would be cleaner to treat this as a motion to amend to remove the road.
Okay.
Vote on that issue only, and then
Very good. Let's
vote
do
on
that.
it as amended.
That was my motion.
Okay, very good. We will deal with the amendment motion only at this point. So the amendment is to remove the road from the future land use plan. Is that correct, Alderman Weifenbach?
Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Okay.
Not the possibility of moving the road, but removing this particular road that's been identified on this plan.
Okay, very good. Discussion on the amendment, and we will hold discussion only to the amendment on the floor, please. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question. Has the traffic engineer ever been with future land use and checked out any of these roads or helped with the future land use?
Marcia?
By chance?
No, these are based on future needs of roads and the spacing. They're not based on current traffic rates.
But it seems like to me, if I was having a problem with roads and explaining, the man just said that there was issues with the curb and some of the stuff and how the road is connected. And I guess to me, ask the professionals. And the professional would be a guy that would say, okay, if you look at this and based on this, since it's been such a big discussion and we want to at this point remove that road, it seems like I would ask the guy that does this for a living, which is a traffic engineer, to at least check out these roads and give his advice and come back to this council with maybe somewhat of some advice on this.
I might, Mr.
Marcia?
I just would comment that one of the members of the Future Land Use Committee and the Planning Commission that's been involved in this discussion is Denny Langeth, the former Secretary of the Department of Transportation for the state of South Dakota. And that was part of the conversation that we had with Denny, was about preservation of right-of-ways and the fact that what we're looking at is long-term the reconstruction of this roadway. There was nothing identified during the process that indicated the road couldn't be reconstructed in the future to meet significantly improved standards, and that was part of the specific conversation. So we do have some very highly qualified people involved in the process.
And I appreciate that, Marcia, but it seems like with the common sense of what this man just said and what you just said, it's conflicting. But I appreciate the comment. at this point, I would really like to help these people, and if this is one of the things we could do, and we knew at this point surely that this would work, I'd be okay with that. I understand that there's a ravine and some other things, but are we going to put the road somewhere else? I guess I don't have all my questions answered, except that we would remove the road, which at this point, I'm okay taking that road out. But I'd like to know if we need to reconstruct or put that road somewhere else, or to the left, to the right. So, Marcia, if we took that road out at this point, are we putting that roadway somewhere else? Is there somewhere else we can put it, or do we not need that roadway
Marcia?
in this?
You're not putting that road somewhere else. The Future Land Use Committee felt it was important to have a corridor somewhere else, and that was the reason for the discussion to have a neighborhood meeting. But if I might offer another alternative, as you have in 2 other plans where you removed roadways, you asked that those future corridors be included for additional studies at some time down the road. Now, obviously, our 2010 funds for road corridor studies are committed to that. Probably this would be 2012 before we would have a chance to look at corridors in this vicinity. But that's certainly something you could do and have done with some other projects.
So you're saying if I amend this motion, I could amend that with
You
a
can't
corridor
amend
study?
an amendment. We're dealing with an amendment on the floor, so you cannot amend the amendment.
Well, he's removing a road with a corridor study. Can he add that to his amendment with a corridor study in 2010? Jason?
Yeah.
That way we made sure we took care of the road, took care of the issues, and we didn't eliminate something that we shouldn't not do for the future without a corridor study.
Let me state the obvious. I think by doing that, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road, because they'll be right back at the same area looking at the same location to put a road. I think one way or another you need to make a determine either it's appropriate to leave in or you need to pull it out. But if you say that you're going to look at it at a future date, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road, and these folks really don't have basically a definitive answer.
But wouldn't you be making a statement by saying the council wants that road removed, and hopefully by that corridor study that you could find somewhere else for that road to go that would make more common sense?
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Just, if you're going to do a corridor study, that's going to be an engineering study, and it doesn't deal with the politics involved out in the neighborhood, and they may very well likely go back in the same place. So just so you know.
Okay, but I'd like, if that's okay with the motion maker, I think it adds to,
Okay.
I think
Is that all
it
right
makes
with
a
the motion maker? Alderman Weifenbach? You willing to accept that as a
Mr. Mayor,
friendly?
I think that if we just eliminate the road, that doesn't eliminate the possibility of doing some other study. I think that maybe we could bring that up as a separate item if we wished, and I understand. I think that I'd prefer that, just eliminate the road. I mean, I'm not a professional by any means, but I have the ability to understand that the fact that building a road there would be pretty close to unsurmountable.
Okay, very good. We're going to deal with amendment only. To be honest with you, these 2 items were an item to be continued, and let's deal with the amendment, and then let's see where this leads. But let's see. Further discussion on the amendment only, please. We'll hold the discussion to the amendment. Let's go to Alderman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions for Marcia Elkins, if I may.
Go ahead, please.
The whole time I've been curious as to the intent of this, and even the location of this roadway as you have it, or as it's shown. And Marcia, you mentioned that as I understand it, the main intent is the preservation of roadway corridors. Is that correct? Does this road follow section lines as it's currently drawn?
Marcia?
Under this revised plan, yes, a portion
Okay.
of it does follow the section line highways.
Which portion follows the section line highways?
I don't know if I can zoom in close enough to.
Well, I think you can't assume that in 30 years, which is probably when this road is going to get built, that they're not going to have improved. This road currently is very dangerous because it's steep and has an S-curve.
Once you get off of the road and you start heading north, it's a huge gap.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Well, I have some comments.
You guys are going to.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
That's what I'm trying to figure out here. If this plan will let me do that. Let me go back and try the. If you can look, and you should have this available on your screen as well, you can see where the road has been revised in this vicinity to follow the section line highway.
Okay. Is there a state statute that reserves, or any sort of statute that reserves section lines for public roadways?
Marcia?
Actually creates section line highways by statute. So
Creates section line. So in a way, these roads are, at least a major portion, are already preserved by the simple fact that they fall along these section lines.
there's 66 foot of section line highway that's identified unless vacated.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question that I had, and reel me in here, Mayor, if I'm straying.
Okay.
The timeline of of how this came about, and just what information was gathered in putting this road on the map. So, as you spell this out here, we have the timeline we provided. The 1st of January '09 was when the Future Land Use Committee reviewed the draft map. The 29th, they made some changes, and then it says on February 12th, they toured the area. So could I get a description of what the tour of the area was like by someone who was there?
Marcia, were you there?
Yes, I was. The Future Land Use Committee got in a vehicle and drove the area, and specifically talked about this location and the discussion regarding this area.
Did you drive to the ravine that's been mentioned a few times?
No, we did not.
Okay, because I think that's where really the issue lies here is we're victims of the contour map, where a 40-foot contour map hides a 30-foot cliff. Because really, unless we have down the line $5 million burning a hole in our pocket that we have to use for a bridge, I don't think this is where this road should go. So I will be in favor of striking this from the map and letting the Future Land Use Committee take another look at this and come up with something that is going to be financially prudent 20 or 30 years down the road when it comes to. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson. There again, the motion on the floor, and we need to try and keep this somewhat close to the topic, and that is the amended motion to remove the road from the future land use plan. That is the topic that is on the floor. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Thank you very much. In this discussion, I think it's important for my colleagues to remember one thing. Number one, several of the postponements of this issue has been based on the health of one of the people, the son of one of the property owners in the area. So I think the council has really deferred in favor of citizens who had some concerns about someone who could not come forward and be present for the discussion. So at least some of the postponement is not the fault of the council, but is in fact honoring our citizens and being respectful of someone who has some health issues with a family member. So when we're suddenly feeling a sense of urgency about this, I want you to remember that. Secondly, as we, in this proposal, the one thing I think that's problematic, and which Future Land Use has talked about, as I have been a part of that discussion, we really do need to understand how this impacts people further down the road. In other words, up Neck Yoke Road to the top of the hill, where the alternate sites are being offered by the neighbors. And I thought it was tremendously important to have a neighborhood meeting before any further final decisions are made, because we're talking about South Dakota. Actually, I believe this lies in federal law that saves these right-of-ways so that someone is not landlocked at some point in the future. And that's very important, because all of you on the council know that from time to time we have found ourselves in the difficult situation of trying to find access for someone, and the adjacent property is not available or there's no right-of-way. So preserving right-of-way is an important function of government for the future. So I thought, as we talked about, I thought it was important for the neighbors, both at the site that is currently being discussed, but as you go further to up Neck Yoke Road, up toward the court, I thought it was important that all of those folks sit down at the table and at least understand what the challenges are, rather than, and so my suggestion was that we would, I'm going to not be in favor of the amendment, because I think some further discussion needs to take place. And while I understand that the neighbors are concerned about this, I do think we are making not just a 10 or 15-year decision, we are making a decision that is going to affect how this neighborhood develops in the next 20 to 25 years. And so I think we do have time. And in the same way that the neighbors asked us as a council to defer this decision until their neighbors were all able to participate in the discussion, I think the next step for us is to involve those additional neighbors who haven't been a part of this discussion, because suddenly, I mean, the mayor used the term kicking the can down the road, which is, in other words, if you don't like it where it is, you just hand it off to your neighbor. And I don't believe that that serves anyone very well. And so I thought that the idea of having a meeting where both the neighborhood that is currently represented and those additionally that would be affected by any changes we make to the future land use, or excuse, to the major street plan, everyone would have an opportunity to discuss it. So I would urge my colleagues not to make a hasty decision. This is an important long-term discussion, and I think it would be wise for us to defeat the motion on the floor, allow a discussion that includes all of the neighbors along Neckyolka Road in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, I see Mr. Ziegler wanted to speak. Unfortunately, Mr. Ziegler, our rules are pretty specific, and your time to speak was actually during the public comment period. Now, if someone from the council wishes to ask you a question, then we will certainly honor that, but at this point, my apologies, we don't have the mechanism. I just want to make sure you understood that. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, the original motion to continue to February 12th, I was in favor of. To just take it off the map, I don't agree with at this point in time. After visiting with Mr. Mueller and some of the homeowners up there, I'm not in agreement with the road, but I do think they're well on their way to working something out. And Mr. Mueller had some good ideas. We got future land use to come out and take a look at it. I think they need to sit down and show their other ideas. If they could have I could support the motion if it had the corridor study in it. Without it, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman. The motion on the floor is the motion to amend to remove the road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree with Council Members Olson and LaCroix. I think that we have a hard time trying to legislate from up here at the dais, and all of a sudden we're going to remove a road tonight and not know what that will do to the rest of the area out there without discussion or without involvement of those neighbors. I'm for the motion to continue the item because I think we are making progress along the way to listen to the citizens out there, but we need to listen to all of them. I wouldn't support the motion on the floor even if it had the study as a part of it, simply because to remove the road and then say that we're going to have a study is saying that we're only going to look at a certain portion because we've already taken this road connection off. So the study has to come back with looking at some other area only. That's not the way I think that you make decisions for a community. You make decisions for a community by looking globally and looking at all of it, not trying to negatively impact anyone out there, but at the same time, putting all the cards on the table to look at what this connection should look like 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future. This tends to be the case every time we look at future land use. It's a good discussion, and we should have these discussions. It's hard to have these discussions in global terms here sitting at the dais when we're trying to piecemeal to take one road section off and not then giving others an opportunity to comment and think about those. So I will not be in support of the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that I have a hard time believing that the Future Land Use Committee didn't look at the entire area up there. I mean, at some point I sat on the Future Land Use Plan Committee, and you do look at the entire area. I think that it's important that when we're up here and we're talking about this, we make sure we understand that part of the process because they have looked at the entire area. At some point, for some reason, they decided this was the place that they were going to put the road. I find it interesting that they haven't went up there and looked at the area and find that this area is basically unsurmountable to build a road in. I think that there's a multi-million-dollar bridge that would probably have to go in there to pass through that ravine or slight canyon or whatever it may be, and not only getting around the idea of coming off Maria Drive and the street there, and there's a hill, and it would have to cut down that hill. I mean, I would venture to say that where they want to put that intersection probably goes against the rules that we've set forth in traffic engineering, and the fact that you can't have a turn that is on the side of a hill. I mean, people are going to come over the top of the hill. They're going to top of the hill. Someone's going to be turning. There's going to be a wreck, and someone's going to die. And we're all going to sit up here and say, what could we have done differently? I find it interesting that the Land Use Committee hadn't, after all these discussions, spent the time, the opportunity to go out there and look at where they decided to build a road. I think that's important. The other fact of the matter is how much of this is section line. It was mentioned that a portion of this is section line. When I drove there, I know that part of the county highway is section line, but I don't think that it was all section line. And I think probably maybe less than 25 or 30% of it was section line. I think it's important now when we talk about these that we just don't make sure we with the whole perspective into this conversation and we're having it. The council has been requested on several occasions to go out there and take a look at it, so we weren't piecemealing anything, that we were not legislating from the dais, that we did have the opportunity, and I understand everybody's business, everybody's busy, and I think taking this off of the future land use plan doesn't change the integrity of this land use problem. It just says that looking at this area, as some people have agreed, this area doesn't work for this particular road. So let's find another area to put this road that makes a little bit more sense, a little bit more economically feasible, and is better for the future of the citizens in that area. So I don't think that we've legislated from the dais. I think that we spent the time, and it's been on the docket for 8 months, giving us plenty of opportunity to look at it, discuss it, see what the input is. I don't think anything's going to change with this particular area. Nothing's going to change if we leave this on and do a corridor study. I think that I think a corridor study would be appropriate, but I think that at some point that could be a separate item. If it takes me to add that to my amendment, I can deal with that. I'll be fine with that. But I don't believe that we've legislated from the dais. I think that the Future Land Use Committee did look at the entire area out there. They decided by looking at the maps that this was a good place to look at, good place to put this road. I've been out there, I've driven it. It doesn't make any sense in any way, shape, or form in my mind to put the road there. There's a lot of things that would have to be overcome, a lot of obstacles that, and in my mind, are probably unsurmountable. So I just would encourage my colleagues to dispose of this road tonight, move on with the rest of the plan, and then vote in a corridor study there to figure out where it would make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't agree with Alderman Weifenbach more. The initial motion on the floor to continue did just that. It gave opportunity, more time, to have discussion and to look, maybe there's a different and a better solution. That's what continuing this item till February 10th or February 16th would do. The motion that's on the floor doesn't do that. It does just the opposite of, I think, of what you just said, is to look and see if there's something better, because what the motion on the floor says is to take the road off because we know better than engineers, Denny Langeth. We know better than the Future Land Use Committee. We know better than the neighbors that are coming forward saying there could possibly be a better solution. I think the initial motion on the floor to continue this item does not impact that community in any sort of negative way. What it does is continue to have the discussion and give us more time to have a discussion. But by taking it off, I think we could possibly impact someone. We could say, now this road that we're taking off is no longer where that road will be, and we're going to force that the road be put somewhere else. That might not be the best case. So I think you made your case, and I think you convinced me that the best thing to do is to continue to have the discussion and look for better alternatives. We don't do that with the motion that's on the floor.
Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
I'm in agreement with Malcolm. I think this is a hasty decision that doesn't give sufficient input from those who are not here in the room today, because they're not aware that this change might be proposed. So I think this opportunity for further neighborhood discussion is really important.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Bill Waugh.
Thank you, Mayor. I call a question.
Question's been called. Is there any objection to calling the question? Any objection? Not, we go to the motion. Motion on the floor is the motion to amend, which would be striking the road from the major street plan in the future land use plan. Correct? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please.
Hadcock? Waugh?
No.
Martinson?
Aye.
Quaker?
Aye.
Costello?
Aye.
LaCroy?
No.
Chapman?
No.
Olson? No. Wyffenbach? That is 4 to 5.
4 to 5. Motion fails. We're back to the original motion, which is a motion to continue. Can you turn my light? There we go. Now I'm gonna warn everybody right now that I'm gonna hold the discussion extremely tight to the motion to continue. There will be no latitude given. So, discussion on the motion to continue. So to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you very much. I just hope that in the meantime, the things that will happen is there will be a site visit, and we do see feasible alternatives and perhaps even some sort of loose monetary value provided to each alternative, because in looking at the terrain, there are ways to put a road through here without having to cross major ravines. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Malcolm Chapman on the motion to continue.
I call the question.
Is there any objection to calling the question? Okay, there is objection. Do you want to yield, or do you want to go to, okay, okay, we'll yield. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Even though I agreed with taking the road out, I would like more information, and that's why I voted no on there. It's not like I didn't want that to be taken out, but I also wanted the other neighbors and other people to be in the know, just like you folks are tonight, about what's happening before we do that. So that's why, in that case, I had changed. So I believe that everybody needs to be on board and that we have that meeting, and I hope that goes well for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Wyffenbach. Motion to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it short, but I want to know what's going to be any different. And we continued this item several times. They've asked us to visit it. Do we have if we're going to make a specific direction that makes something specifically different, I can understand and I'll agree with this, but I mean, if we're just going to sit up here and continue it, and they're going to come back and we're going to have the same discussion, I'm not sure that I understand that part of it. If we're going to make a certain directive for somebody to do something in particular, can we spell that out so that person or that group of people understand what their task is? So I would ask that from the motion maker to maybe, if that's appropriate, Mr. Mayor, give me an explanation of what's going to change from
Well, but let's go to Marcia Elkins. I think she talked about that a little bit.
Impacted in this area. And so my understanding is that's the sense of the motion to continue, is to allow that to happen.
Mr. Mayor, I'm fine with that, but there's been reference made to professionals and stuff like that. We haven't had any specific traffic engineering study done on this particular item. I'm not going to be held accountable for somebody who's on a committee who's not employed by us saying that their professional opinion in this matter makes any sense. If we're going to do a traffic study or something in this area, and if they come forward with a new future land use idea or where this road should go in, and we're going to quote professional people, then they should probably be paid professionals on staff or hired by the city to make those opinions. There's several times that even professional engineers can make mistakes. I've seen the interstates redone because of particular curves. I've seen city streets that are inappropriate because of decisions that have been made. So I just hope that if we're going to rely on a professional person's opinion, that is either on our staff or a hired professional. So I can support the continuation motion even though I don't understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, the motion on the floor is to continue this item to the February 16, 2010 City Council meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Karen, could you please read in item number 192, please?
A request,
I'm sorry.
Karen or Aaron? Sorry. Go ahead. Karen, go ahead.
a request by the City of Rapid City to consider an application for an amendment to the comprehensive plan to revise the major street plan by eliminating and adding and realigning arterial and collector streets in the Spring Creek neighborhood area future land use plan on property located south of Spring Creek, east of Boulder Hill Road, north of Knotty Pine Road, and west of South Dakota Highway 17, and I would continue this item to the February 16th.
Okay, we have a motion and second to continue this item to the February 16, 2010 City Council meeting. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We are back to item number 38 and the bids. Mr. Preston.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have a number of bid items on the agenda this evening. The first one is the water treatment plant upgrades, Jackson Springs membrane. We received one bid as listed, and that was from the Zenon Environmental Corporation, doing business of GE Water and Process Technology out of Canada. Bid of $3,631,056. I would ask that the motion maker include in their bid, since the project is funded by SRF, State Revolving Fund, that the motion include approval must be contingent upon review and approval of the award by South Dakota Department of Environmental and Natural Resources.
We have a motion and a second to award the bid to Zenon Environmental Corporation for $3,631,056 with a stipulation that must be approved through the SRF. Correct?
Approved by the South Dakota Department of Natural Environment and Natural Resources. DENR.
Got it. Okay, everyone clear on the motion. Let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Robert Ellis. Robert, in the design, was it known, like, this is a pretty specific request. So was it known that there was only one vendor when this went out, or did a couple choose not to participate?
Robert?
There were actually two bidders that we were anticipating would bid on this, GE, which is Xeon for all intents and purposes, and then Siemens was the other firm. Siemens just elected not to submit a bid on this for whatever reason, but there were two vendors that could provide this material.
Okay, thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Anything else? Motion on the floor is for approval of stipulations. Approval of the bid with stipulations that DENR approve. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes.
Item 139 is the Catherine Boulevard Highway 16B Sanitary Sewer Extension Project. We received 10 bids as listed. Staff is recommending accepting the bid from RCS Construction Incorporated, an amount of $502,470.
Do we have a motion, please?
Move approval. Second.
I don't think you can do that both, Karen.
I thought I heard
I heard a move approval, second both from Karen. I'm sorry. She was just louder than you guys. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderman Ron Reifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see the advertising authority on this was $950,000, and the bid from RCS Construction Incorporated for $502,470,000. So we're looking at a difference of almost how much?
$450,000.
$450,000. Is something change, or is that?
It's a great question. Let's go to Robert Ellis.
You know, I really can't explain why the price is so much lower. What we do when we put together the engineer's estimate is for each of the 52 bid items that were in this package, we use the most recent bid awards that we received, so it's the latest information. So we plug those in, we still get $950,000. So if I had to guess what's going on here is we have contractors who want to secure a workload for their forces during the winter months, generally when the construction season slows down, and maybe we got favorable prices because of that.
Yeah, I understand, and I look at the names on there on these highly professional construction companies that have bid these projects, and they've saved the city quite a bit of money. So I wanted to hand it out to them and just say one more time that the bidding process does work when you involve professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion on the floor is for approval in the award of the bid to RCS Construction for $502,470. Any further discussion on that motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Preston.
Item number 140 is snow removal operation for city parking lot number 4. We received 2 bids as listed. Staff is recommending accepting the bid from Heavy Constructors Incorporated, the amount of $495.
We have a motion and second for approval to award the bid to Heavy Contractors for $495,000. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Mayor.
What'd I say? 45.
Mr. Mayor.
We just gave away all the money we just saved. Yes. Alderman Weifenbach.
Thank you. You have me on having the floor, so I thought I'd continue to use it. I appreciate that.
You certainly have the
floor. You
floor.
anticipated my question.
I did.
I appreciate that. Is that, Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Mr. Preston, and the question would be is that for, that's for what period of time? Is that every time they clean it?
That is correct.
Per event.
$495 to come in and remove the snow from that lot.
Who had the bid previously, and how much was it?
Previously, up until this point, what we did is we received quotes from different vendors to come in and operate, and I think it was by an hourly basis. Mr. Ellis, maybe you can clarify that, what we did before.
Mr. Ellis?
Yes, that is correct. The way that all these parking lots were handled before, they were on the hourly basis, and we had quotes from different contractors.
How much did we pay before? I mean, there's a huge difference there. Not that I'm not happy about it. I'm sure that these guys are highly professional at what they do.
Mr. Ellis?
You know, I can't give you a price that was used each time. It ranged from $440 for a storm event that happened on April 5th last year, or of this year, down to $112 for an event that happened January 27th. So it was by the hour previously. Now it's a flat rate each time they come. Whether it's a blizzard or it's 2 inches of snow, it's $495.
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion. Let's go to Aaron Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Robert, so you just said that essentially regardless of the amount of snow, we get one flat rate. At the same time, I would assume there's some sort of timeline that constitutes an event. So if they had to scoop 2 consecutive days, would that be 2 events? If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, let's go to Robert Ellis.
That is correct. Each time they have to mobilize and come plow, they would be paid the $495.
Okay, and then you mentioned 2 inches. Is that arbitrary? Is there a minimum amount of snow?
Generally, 2 inches is when we actually have the lots plowed.
Okay, and then do you send out the call to have them plowed?
We do.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Council President.
Thank you, Aaron. Next, we'll recognize Alderwoman Karen Gunderson Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comment, it's really a question for Robert, I think. Is there a time limit for this? I mean, could you, for example, could the bid be different and you could take 3 days to plow it, or a week, or you know, shovel it by hand or something?
No, actually, what it calls for is that the snow be removed in a timely manner, so that, because we do lease these spots out, we need to have it cleared before working hours start.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Robert. Motion on the floor is for approval. Any further discussion? I'll recognize Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question would be, the payment of this, does it come from the parking lot fund?
That's correct, PLNA.
And the parking lot fund is sustainable on its own? It doesn't get any general funding?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
I'll recognize Mr. Preston.
No, there's no general funds involved in this. This comes from the PLNA, or the parking lot area fund.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is for approval. Hearing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Item number 141 is the snow removal operations for city parking lot number 5. We received 2 bids as listed. Staff is recommending accepting the bid from Heavy Constructors, amount of $795,000. $795.
It's been moved and seconded for approval. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Item number 5 is snow removal operations for city parking lot number 6-1. We received 2 bids as listed. Is that not showing up there? That's one at the top. And, okay, received 2 bids. Staff is recommending accepting a bid from Heavy Constructors, amount of $395.
It's been moved and seconded for approval to accept the contract from Heavy Contractors. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Item 143 is snow removal operation for city parking lot number 9. We received the 1 bid. Staff is recommending accepting that bid from Heavy Constructors, an amount of $395.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, the same. Motion carries. Thank you, Jim.
Item number 144 is snow removal operation for city parking lot number 8. We received the 1 bid. Staff is recommending accepting the bid from Heavy Constructors, an amount of $375.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the bid from Heavy Contractors. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Item 145 is snow removal operation for city parking lot number 6-2. We received the 1 bid. Staff is recommending we reject that bid and be authorized to re-advertise.
That's my motion.
Been moved and seconded to reject the bid and go out for a rebid,
Re-advertising.
re-advertisement. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Item 146 is snow removal operation for city parking lot number 7. We received 2 bids as listed. Staff is recommending we accept the bid from Heavy Constructors, the amount of $495.
Been moved and seconded to accept the bid from Heavy Contractors. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, the same. Motion carries.
The last bid item we have is to operate equipment rental for snow removal operations. This is on an hourly basis per piece of equipment, and staff is recommending that we award the total bid to the following contractors on an on-call basis. In other words, we're asking that you accept all of those bids that are listed there. For example, site work specialists, their motor grader is $90 an hour, and their front end loader is $90, and their dump truck is $90, plus all the other contractors there at those rates.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, same side. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, that does take us to the end of the bids. That takes us to items from the council and council liaison reports. We did have 2 items, a 147A, which is a travel request. Alderman Chapman, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a travel request for Deb Hadcock and Barb Garcia to attend the National League of Cities Bank on Cities campaign meeting to be held in Seattle, Washington, December 7th through the 9th. The cost of this would be up to $2,174, but the more actual cost, because of some realized savings, will be about $1,600, of which $1,700 will be paid back by the National League of Cities for our participation, along with Denver, Colorado, Bryan, Texas, Gaithersburg, Maryland, Indianapolis, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, Newark, New Jersey, and St. Petersburg, Florida, in the Bank On program. We were one of the 8 cities around the country that received technical assistance for this program. And the program is really an outreach to make sure that we reach the unbanked in a community so that there could be long-term financial stability in families in these 8 communities as a pilot program. So I would recommend that I would move approval of the travel request of up to $2,174 for Deb Hadcock and Barb Garcia. And again, that price is more looking like it'll be about $1,600, of which up to $1,700 will be paid back by the National League of Cities. That's my
Second.
motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We also had a 147B, which was Deb Hadcock wished to thank some folks. Alderwoman Hadcock, you have the floor, ma'am.
I have to get my speech book out, just kidding. No, this was just a thank you to all the people that helped with the Christmas lights. The Star on Top of the Hill was from Ron Barber and the Water Department employees and helpers. For Halley Park, there's a big thank you to Scott Anderson from the Parks Department, the electrician for the city, Jerry Newberg, and the traffic engineer, John Less. They've always been very helpful for taking care of our issues with electricity, and John Less has just been a helper of almost everything that we had to do with Christmas lights. So I really thank those guys. They have been totally awesome, easy to work with, and we got things done really quick this year. A big thank you to the Roosevelt Park Neighborhood Watch Group, the Downtown Volunteer District, Mr. Holloway and Ms. Severson for the County Sheriff's Department. They always bring us lots of work release people, about 13 this year. We appreciated that, to decorate Halley Park. Family, friends, and others, we decorated Halley Park in about 3 hours this year, so it was awesome. And thanks again to the Parks Department. They helped us do the rest and get the big trees and stuff done. The Mount Rushmore Road Group, they took over Wilson Park decorating with volunteers in the Parks Department. They did awesome. We thank them for doing Mount Rushmore Road in Wilson Park. And then for downtown, we had Chief Raffling and the volunteers from the fire department. They took their days off, the firefighters, to come and decorate about 32 trees downtown with ladders and lots of lights. And then again, Scott Anderson and his couple of his park workers, we appreciated them. So thank you, Mr. Rafflin. You guys have always been great to us, and the firefighters that volunteered their time. With cooperation with the mayor, the lights will be on November 28th. And just for the public's information, we did start early this year because it was such a problem during the wind and the cold and the other times to try and get those lights and those wreaths and things up, that we actually saved many man hours putting them up a little bit early this year. So we appreciate everybody that took their time out and volunteered this year to get this done. All the lights and decorations were paid for by donations. Many people were involved with donating. We appreciate the donations that people have gained in the past and this year. So thanks again to everybody that made our Christmas lights this year a big success.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on. Let's see, item 148. This is to acknowledge a raffle request from the Black Hills Symphony Orchestra Society, Inc. And where'd Jason go? This came in late, just so you know. The reason it's actually on the agenda in this location is the fact that it was late coming in for legal and finance, but we do need to have this approved so that they can move forward with the raffle at the appropriate time. We have a motion and second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. That does take us to public hearing items 149 through 197. 149 through 197 inclusive. Chair would look for a motion to open the public comment period. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. We do have one speaker request form from James Skull, item 159.
Well, good evening. I'm James Skull, and I own this land that is up for possible rezoning. And I thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I've spoken with the growth management about this property and the possibility of rezone. And I guess we concurred on some points. I feel we did that the adjacent land to this is all light industrial. It's next to the economic development industrial park up there. In fact, we tied to it, and we're working with them to actually replat some land so the land is more usable. And the height in relationship to Elkvale Road makes it questionable commercial type property, we feel, and the land to the east of it, east of Elkvale Road, seems to be designated more for the retail portion of that part of town. So with that in mind, I feel that we should move toward light industrial and tie it in with the rest of the economic development industrial park up there. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Scull. I have no further speaker request forms on any of the items 149 through 197 inclusive. Now, just a reminder, we do need to leave the open public hearing open at this time. We'll close it actually after we take up a few of these items. Let's go to the continued public hearing consent items. This is items 149 through 154 inclusive. Does anyone wish to have any items 149 through 154 inclusive removed from the consent calendar? Marcia? You good? Okay. Seeing no lights, the chair will look for a motion to approve the continued public hearing consent items 149 through 154 per the recommendations in the packet. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. That does take us to the end of the public hearing consent items. Chair would look for a motion to close the public hearing items 149 through 197 inclusive, please. We have a motion and a second to close public comments. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. We are on to the consent public hearing items. This is items 155 through 190 inclusive. 155 through 190 inclusive. Do we need to pull any of those items 155 through 190 inclusive? I have currently item 160, 161, 162, and item 170 we need to pull. Any others? Go ahead. Yep.
I would like to pull item 155, please.
Item 155, very good. Additional items to be pulled from the consent calendar. Any additional items, please turn on your lights. Seeing none, the chair will look for a motion to approve the consent public hearing items 155 through 190 inclusive, with the exception of 155, 160, 161, 162, and 170. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. We are on to item 155. Karen, could you please read that in? Or was it?
Deny
Karen,
what?
was it-
Deny. What?
Did you read this in? Okay. He's getting excited. We'll let Aaron read these in. Item 155.
This youthful exuberance. Item number 155, deny without prejudice a request by Forefront Design Incorporated for Rapid City Economic Development Foundation for a variance to the subdivision regulations to waive the requirement to install pavement, curb, gutter, sidewalk, streetlight, conduit, water, and sewer along East Anamosa Street, and to waive the requirement to install sidewalk on Concourse Drive, as per Chapter 16.16 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, in an area located at 333 Concourse Drive. And I would move to deny without prejudice.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny without prejudice. Any discussion on that motion?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you very much. I would just like some clarification on this as far as what's driving the request for denial without prejudice.
Marcia? Oh, hang on, let's get your mic on. Go ahead.
In the discussions we've had with the applicant, they have now designed Anamosa Street, and so they will not need to obtain a variance to waive the requirement for those improvements. They are coordinating with the adjacent property owner to use the existing tax increment district that was intended to be used for Anamosa Street construction. In addition, the sidewalks have been identified on the plans, and when new buildings are constructed on the site, they will build the sidewalks on the north-south street.
I see. Thank you very much, Marcia. It's my understanding that this has gone through a few different redesigns. Is that true?
Marcia?
I would not say it's gone through redesigns. There's been ongoing discussions about the appropriate alignment of Anamosa Street. Again, the developer's responsible for the construction of 3 lanes of that. That's anticipated long-term to be a 7-lane facility, more likely a 5-lane. But trying to figure out how to coordinate that has been an ongoing discussion between the developer's engineer and city staff.
Well, I can certainly understand that when you bring to light that eventually it's visions for 7-lane. We need a lot of planning for that. Thanks for answering my questions, Marcia.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
To summarize, will there be sidewalks
Marcia?
ultimately along this property?
There will be as part of the TIF along Anamosa Street, and when new building construction is proposed along the north-south street, it will be required for a new building.
Thank you. I think it's important that we include sidewalks in this area because clearly people are going to be walking in the not too distant future at all.
Thank you. Motion on the floor is to deny without prejudice. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. That does take us to items 160, 161, 162. The chair would look for a motion to acknowledge the applicant's withdrawal of those three items. We have a motion and a second to acknowledge the applicant's withdrawal of items 160, 161, 162. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. Item 170. Karen, could you read that in, please?
Red Rock Golf Club LLC, DB, doing business as Red Rock Golf Club, is a request for a retail on sale liquor license renewal. Motion for approval.
Okay, we have a motion and second. We have a motion and second for approval of the renewal for the Red Rocks on sale liquor. Let's go to Alderman Bill Waugh, who I believe is going to abstain.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want the record to show I will be abstaining as I'm an employee of Red Rock.
Very good. I think it's more of a golfer of Red Rock than
Yeah.
an employee. Okay. He's been, well, yeah. We won't say how much he actually works. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. That does take us to the end of the consent public hearing items, item 190. So we are on to the non-consent public hearing items. This is item 191. Mr. Costello? Oh, you're right. We did dispose of 191, 192. We're on to 193, please. Thank you for that.
Be my pleasure to read this. Item 193.
Boy.
Second reading.
Scared.
Pardon?
Scared.
Oh, it's this scared. I thought, okay.
I think
go.
these are ordinance and came through legal and finance.
Well, he was so excited.
I know, enthusiasm is good. The Jolly Llamas play real great too. Okay. Let's see, item number, we're starting with 193. Second reading of ordinance 5551, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by James Hogue for Hogue Land Company for rezoning from general commercial district to business park district. And my motion is for approval, I think.
Approval of stipulations?
Oh, approval of stipulations, yes.
We have a motion second for approval of stipulations. Any discussion on that motion? This is second reading of ordinance 5551. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. Item 194, please.
Okay, I was gonna catch up here. Okay. Item 194, second reading ordinance 5551, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by James Hogue for Hogue Land Company, West Central Manufacturing, for a rezoning from general commercial district to business park district on property located at 818, 910, and 920 East St. Andrew Street. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval. Discussion on that motion. Wait, I think we got lost here. I think we already approved this.
Correct. I think that 194 is.
Yep. Karen, you actually need to read it 194. We've already.
So sorry.
Yep. She read in 193.
I read in 193, you're right.
Which we already approved with stipulations, and so if you could, yeah, we don't like it that much. We don't need that kind of twice.
So now we're at 194. Second reading of ordinance number 5552, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by the City of Rapid City for a rezoning from no-use district to low-density residential district on property located west of Valley Drive and north of South Dakota Highway 44. My motion is for approval.
We have a motion second for approval. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. 195, please.
Second reading of ordinance 5554, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by the city of Rapid City for rezoning from no use district to low density residential district on property located at 3033 South Valley Drive. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval with stipulations. Any discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval of second reading of ordinance 5554. Seeing no further lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 196, please.
Second reading ordinance 5555, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by the city of Rapid City for a rezoning from no use district to low density residential district on property located at 2819 and 2826 Garden Lane, and my motion is for approval with stipulations.
We have a motion and second for approval of stipulations. This is the second reading of ordinance 5555. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing no lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. 197, please.
Second reading of ordinance 5557, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by James L. Skull Jr. for a rezoning from general commercial to light industrial district on property located at 925 Elkvale Road. My motion is for approval with stipulations.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of stipulations. Discussion on that motion. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Marcia. This is the property that we had talked about with the sidewalks, and we waived the sidewalk in the front of the frontage of the property. And I wanted to know when the trigger would be pulled to have that sidewalk go in on the east-west side, or be the south side of that, right? Or the east-west side of that?
Marcia?
Along this side?
Along the side where the people will be walking to.
Marcia, go ahead.
I can acclimate myself to where Elkvale is, but
There was sidewalk, there was a
There you
variance
go.
requested to waive the requirement for the sidewalk.
is that
in
Elkvale right there then? to the
Correct.
east?
That was waived. And again, then along this area, when a new building is constructed,
Right.
they'll be required to put sidewalk along the south
So the
side.
trigger is when a new building is built.
Correct.
Is this plotted into 2 lots? And we're
It's platted into one lot.
isn't there a building on the front part of that?
There's a building on this site, yes.
Okay. And is that the part where we're rezoning into light industrial?
Correct.
Okay.
It's light industrial located adjacent here to the west
Okay.
and to the southwest. It's GC on the frontage.
I don't have an issue with that. I'm just trying to, so where the building is right now is general commercial?
Correct, this ordinance would change that to make it light industrial.
Okay. And that doesn't trigger the sidewalk?
No, it does not.
What would trigger the sidewalk?
A new building being constructed on the site.
On that same site?
When we replatted that, we were required to bond for that sidewalk. So the bond is up, and we're just negotiating with the city the best way to put it in.
Do you want to?
When we replatted that property just recently, I'm James Skull.
Hey, hang on. Let's
my
do it.
question, my question would go to Mr. Skull.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for playing.
We replatted that property recently, and when we did that, we bonded for that sidewalk along there. And so we're just negotiating with the city because of the steep grade, the best location to place it. So we placed a bond then, we're going to put that in shortly.
Yeah, my concern, because we allowed it not to happen on the frontage because that didn't make any sense. And then it was on the, I think on that side would be the south side, right? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So we are putting that in, Mr. Skull?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Just a question. Are we putting the west side? I knew there was a road going on the west side of him too. That's why we changed the alignment, didn't we, of that road? So there'd be a road down the back side of that as well, on the west side?
Marcia?
No, the road will be shown, the road is where it's at right now, this location. What we've shown and worked with Mr. Skoll and the Economic Development Foundation and Dr. Pankratz is about replatting these properties potentially long-term into lots that will front this way. And so the sidewalks then will go in along this frontage.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. And then, why wasn't there a PID put on this property being on a frontage road on Elkvale instead of just light industrial?
The existing zoning is general commercial on this site. The existing zoning of the surrounding lands to the west is light industrial. Since no other properties had the planned developments, the Future Land Use Committee did not think it was necessary to treat this property similarly to the adjacent lots.
Well, I guess from what we just talked about 2 weeks ago and putting a PID on his, a lot of those were light industrial and general commercial and different things, but we did not treat him any different, and we did put a PID on there. So I'm trying to figure out why this property is any different. I would put a PID on this, council, because this is a frontage road. We don't want an industrial type area, meaning we want this to be the frontage to look good, and if you want the frontage in this area to be nice, and there is a lot of low-density residential, this is the second access out of it. It would look nice. It would take care of the issue for the neighbors. And Mr. Skull has been nice enough to put the sidewalk in there. I think that would be the second thing we could do to help those neighbors in that area to make it look nice. So if I wanted to put a PID on this, how would I change it?
Marcia?
You can't approve rezoning with a stipulation. The only stipulation we have on this right now is that you have the associated comp plan adopted, which you took care of earlier on the agenda. So all the steps have to be met prior to council action. If you wanted to require them to do a plan development designation so that they would bring in initial and final subsequent time, you would need to continue this for 2 weeks. Ask Mr. Skoll to do that, to file the PDD. That would require him to go through the initial and final development plan before they could construct it. I would caution you that this is the property that has been identified for the arms accessory. TDI arms to locate. They are anxious. They've already started moving into the site under the existing designation. Some of their storage. There's also another company that's in the process of relocating to this site as well. My concern is that it would delay their efforts if you were to delay this. So I just caution you that those projects are in the works to bring some additional jobs to Rapid City.
So you're saying if we did a PID on this, they probably wouldn't buy it because we would delay them for 2 weeks?
Marcia?
If you were to continue this to allow Mr. Skoll to submit the plan development designation, then before they could go ahead and actually move their facilities into this site in the future, they would have to go through the full initial and final development plan. So it would likely delay them 45 days. And I know that they're anxious to move into it after working with Mr. Snow from the Economic Development Foundation.
So let me ask you, a man was trying to sell this property 2 weeks ago, and he was in the mood, or not in the mood, that's not the word. He wanted to put his into light industrial. We made him go through the process. We had him do everything. We delayed him. We delayed him by telling him that that wasn't appropriate there because we had to go through the future land use. And I don't think this is any different. I understand in that case he would have sold the property and he probably would have been making money right away, just like this property. I do appreciate Mr. Skull and what he's doing, and he's selling this and doing a very positive thing for Rapid City, but we have to treat everybody the same. And when that came forward, that had the same circumstance as this, council. So I'm only saying this because this is a frontage road. This is in an area where there's going to be people walking. There's going to be a lot of housing development behind it. It's going to make a big difference of what this property and any frontage that we do around there. So that's actually why I want to do it. And I don't think it'll delay this process. And if I could, Mayor, ask Mr. Skull if this would hurt his sale or do anything to this property if we required him to do a PID.
Mr. Skull, do you understand the question?
Yes, I do. As far as the company, they're leasing at this point, and they're, I guess they're waiting for approval that they can use this building. Their manufacturing equipment is in transit in the United States.
Right.
It's kind of bizarre, but from my standpoint, but I don't know if it'd delay it.
Well, what
I know
I'm
that they're
saying
gonna
is,
manufacture.
sir, it's going to be light industrial still. It sounds like with the council, if this council agrees, but with a PID, it's more, a little bit more with few stipulations, and it actually protects the frontage, I think, and adds a little bit more to what we're doing for this property.
Say Deb.
So
a suggestion here. The motion on the floor is actually to approve the rezoning. There's nothing in this motion that deals with the planned commercial designation. So I think in order to discuss it, we really need to have some kind of a motion on the floor.
Okay, can you tell me what that motion, just to move it into instead of light industrial? That's what I was asking her.
Well,
If it can be a
I
P-
believe Marcia's answered that, and really, the only motion would be to continue this item for 2 weeks because we cannot put stipulations on rezoning. Is that correct, Jason? So really, the only motion
Okay.
that you really could offer would be to continue this for 2 weeks, and then request him to come back and actually go through the planned development designation.
So I apologize, Mr. Skull, on that. I guess that would be my motion, is to continue for 2 weeks, so we could put a PID on this. I think it'd make to make the appropriate motion.
If I could, Alderman Hadcock, that may work quite well when the building isn't constructed, but this building is constructed and all the improvements are there at this time. I don't know how this would change what's there.
Maybe some of the landscapes, sir, and some of the areas for
It's all landscape, though.
Okay, we'll stop the back and forth if we can.
Sorry,
please.
Mr. Skull.
Okay, motion, we have a substitute motion on the floor to continue for 2 weeks. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Alderwoman Hadcock, you still have the floor if you'd like it, ma'am. Did you second that, Ron?
Second for discussion.
Okay. Okay, second for discussion. Deb, you still have the motion. Now, there again, the only thing that we're going to discuss is the continuation motion, whether it's appropriate or not to continue this. Discussion on the continuation motion. Alderwoman Hadcock, you still have the floor, ma'am.
I guess my point is, and it makes me madder than heck sometimes, is how we treat people differently on some of these rezonings and these things that we do. It does. It just kind of makes me mad. Not because this isn't a positive thing, but how a guy could go through a process and another guy could do it and we can just do it quick. What is the difference? Our process needs to change. We need to help everyone and we need to do it right. I'm not in agreement with our process and how we do things with people.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I kind of disagree that we're doing things differently. I mean, each case is different on a basis, and the one I'm thinking about is in front of us tonight, and being surrounded by light industrial, I think it's more appropriate that this move forward, and I think with the discussion on the sidewalks, the bonds there for it, it's landscaped very well now. I go by it every morning. So I don't see no reason for continuing this on and delaying what needs to be done. So I'm in support of the motion on the floor for approval.
Okay.
Well, no, we got
The motion on the
motion for
floor
continues.
is
I'm
a-
not in support of the motion on the floor to continue.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Karen Olson.
Everything that I was going to say has already been said.
Okay, that was easy. Let's go to Alderman, whoops. Okay, let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel that this is, I'm not going to probably support the motion on the floor. I seconded it so we could have the discussion because I think it's an appropriate discussion. And I am going to bring this back to an agenda item that this process is skewed and the fact that we're not treating these people the same. And I'm not, but at the same token, I'm not going to hold Mr. Skull to, because I think moving this forward makes sense, as I did moving the other item forward. But we were willing to let that guy go bankrupt in the same situation. And I think that, but I'm not going to hold Mr. Skull accountable for our process. I think this process is skewed. I think that I think that bringing the ammunition manufacturer to the city of Rapid City in this particular location makes sense. And I'm not going to hold up the process of it, but I do think that this process is skewed, and we need to have a very good conversation about how this all has transpired and how we were willing to let someone go bankrupt over weeks and months, a period of time, when the same identical situation on a property that needed help and needed fixed up that could cash flow. I think that Alderman Hadcock has a point, and I seconded it to allow her to speak on her point, but I'm not going to hold someone else accountable for our lack of due process. So, but I just want to let that name. We will bring this forward at another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion on the floor is to continue for 2 weeks. Let's go to Alderman Sam Quaker.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not support the motion to continue, and here's why. I think it's important to recognize that there's a fundamental difference between an empty lot and a lot that has a completed building on it. There's a fundamental difference. The issue a couple weeks ago did not have a fully constructed building like what we're seeing now. And hold on a second, I have the floor. I mean,
Alderman Quaker, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I see a fundamental difference in the two situations, unless I'm thinking of a different lot. But the lot that I'm thinking along St. Patrick Street, that lot was an empty lot. It was not fully constructed, and the time to put on a PID or an overlay, technically the best time to do that was when you have an empty lot. Now the other option is we can approve this tonight, approve Mr. Skull's application, and then down the line we can do what we've done along Fifth Street and do an overlay, and that works also. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Ron Weifenbach. They're going to remember the motion on the floor is
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
continuation motion.
Yep, I understand the motion to continue. The other property did have a lot on it, had a building on it, and that was part of the discussion because the owner had someone in mind to clean up the building itself. And I agree with Mr. Quaker that I don't want to hold this up. I think this is a good opportunity, and I'm not going to hold someone else accountable, but I don't understand it, and I guess trying to get some kind of understanding of it tonight would hasten the process. But comments were made about the lot on St. Patrick Street about building an asphalt plant, building a concrete plant. All that stuff can happen in this situation also. So I just want to let the council know that this can happen without the PID. But I think it's important to move this along. But I think there's two different standards here, very apparent to me. I think that would be appropriate for another discussion because holding someone else accountable who is going through the process as they understand it is fair. So I'll support moving forward with this project. But there was a building on that other lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderwoman Deb Hadcock.
Okay, I understand I lost this vote. But I'm going to tell you, in the future, for process and procedure, that's what I'm going to fight. And we're going to have to, as a council, as a city, some of our stuff I think needs to change in order to go through this process and procedure. That's what I'll be looking at and how we do things for that to make it better for all people and how we do our process. So I guess that's my point, and that's why I wanted to make the point. And it's about all people and how we do our process for City Hall. So I appreciate listening to tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Lloyd LaCroix.
My final comments, Mayor, is sometimes PIDs can help a property owner and sometimes they can hinder him. And in this case, it would hinder him. In the case that we've been talking about on St. Pat Street, it helped that person and we worked with them. And so I don't think that we treated him any different. We actually helped him. And in this case, it would be hindrance. And so the motion on the floor, I'm not going to be supportive of. And I do think we helped the guy on St. Pat. And we're not having a double standard here. Thank you.
Okay, motion on the floor is substitute motion to continue. Seeing no further lights. All those in favor of a continuation motion signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, motion fails. We are back to the original motion, which is a motion to approve with stipulations. Any discussion on that motion? Let's go to Alderman Aaron Costello.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Mr. Skoll for going ahead with the sidewalks. When we looked at that area earlier, it's definitely in need. There's sidewalks going on the opposite side of Homestead leading there, so I commend you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no further lights, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Preston, the bill list.
Thank you, Mayor. The bill list totals $6,682,001. There are no additions or changes.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the bill list for $6,682,001 and no pennies.
That is correct.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes. Mr. Green, executive session?
Yes, and it would be for the purposes permitted by SDCL 1-25-2.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second to go into executive session for the purposes permitted by STCL 1-25-2. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. For an executive session. Motion and second come out of executive session. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. Mr. Green, item number 199.
Item 199 is to authorize the Mayor and Finance Officer to sign the letter of engagement with Nooney, Soleil, and Van Norman in regard to the Big Sky matter. The funding source for this would be the unexpended funds in the Growth Management Department salary line item. Total amount not to exceed $50,000, and recommendation is for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes.
Mayor, under direction to staff, I would ask the council to direct the city attorney to seek legal opinion from outside counsel in the personnel matter.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion passes.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion. We have a motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.